Well, hello YouTube, it's me Fortmaster, and welcome to a new reaction. This is How Will the Weird Root End by Nighthawk, and this was suggested to me on my Discord server by Gudamat, and honestly, it's a very valid question, because apart from, other things, we don't know how Deltarune's going to end normally. And there's all sorts of speculations on who the knight is. Is it actually Des? Is it Carol? Is it like somebody? Is like the whole Des and Carol thing just a red herring? And how where are the other codes going to be? Is the next chapter going to be in Asgore's flower shop? But with everything that's happening, especially on the weird, especially in chapter 4 with that whole unpleasantness going on with in chapter 4, especially when Carol phones and says, "Oh hell, Noelle's looking very forward to going with you to the festival tomorrow." Oh god, I mean honestly, with everything that's going on, I've seen a couple people theorize that Noelle is going to kill Chris in chapter 5 during the weird route. Oh god, oh that would be so weird. I've also seen others, again with the whole thing in chapter 4, the little red dot that was a rose and then turned into the cracking pattern. I've heard people suggesting that that's the beginning of a soul, a red soul forming in Noelle, and then as the weird route progresses, we'll eventually transfer our control over to her from Chris, and that would maybe have something to do with the angel or something like that, because there's also a lot of angel imagery going on with Noelle. And then there's, the whole thing with Birdley being in the hospital. And I remember an old theory about that suggesting maybe that would break Birdley out of the prophecy and he'd be another, random, random element going in, kind of making things weird, But yeah, again, it's all you can say. It's oh, the weird route, is where things get weird and the story is, changing in some very, disturbing ways. But again, we don't even know how the regular game ends yet. So we have no idea, at least I don't have any idea, where the weird route could potentially be going. I mean, I said, or my personal theory right now at the very least, is that the weird route is going to end before, long before, the normal game does. Maybe at chapter 5 when, Noelle kills us or something like that. And that the regular game will extend further as the prophecy is either broken or not. All this sort of weirdness could happen. But honestly, yeah, at this point, literally anything could happen. So yeah, we should probably get into this video then. So yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And if you like this video or any other video that I make, I'd very much appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to my channel. Because almost 3/4 of the people that watch my videos aren't subscribed, and I'd very much like that to change, because my main goal for this year is to hopefully hit 10,000 subscribers. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
Hello again, people. I'm in the middle of writing the Susie video right now, but I'm experiencing some writer's block. So, I am going to distract myself by talking about something that is kinda unrelated, but the more I think about it, is most certainly going to revolve back to Susie. Today we are talking about the weird route, and how the weird route might end. Naturally, we don't know exactly how it'll end, but considering we are at a point in time where there is more Deltarune released than there isn't.
So we think. Again, I'm kind of, it's been pointed out before that, Deltarune chapter intros are numbered all the way up to chapter 10. So we never know if, Toby might not do a sneaky on us.
I think based on what we have, we can make a pretty good guess. Assume spoilers for Deltarune and Undertale.
Don't have to worry there.
So the weird route is well known at this point, so I will only go over it in a bullet point fashion. Skip ahead if you don't want to sit through the explanation. The weird route was discovered soon after Chapter 2's release. It truly stunned a lot of us considering how backwards the route seemed compared to the normal one. Real talk, this discovery was absolutely insane when it happened. Initially, I thought it was another one of those fan animations or fan projects disguised as real content, yet it was real. Kinda exciting and terrifying at the same time. This was still in the early days of Deltarune's development, which is kinda crazy to say considering Deltarune has been in development since before 2018. In 2021, Toby Fox and the Dad Squad hopped on stream and surprised everyone with a new chapter on top of the one we already had. Truly one of the most hyped video game experiences of all time.
Tutorial model.
Up until this point, I and several others were 100% content with a linear story with a single static ending, as long as it was satisfying.
Yeah,
but for
as you
some
should
reason,
be.
Toby wasn't. We were under the impression that Deltarune would have one ending, because, you know, that's what we were told. One ending, that's it. No funny business, your choices don't matter, all your theories are wrong, thanks for playing. Yet here, we find a massive deviation in what would normally be played in Chapter 2. The weird route includes a series of choices that lead to a seemingly different outcome. Instead of helping Noelle gain some much-needed confidence in herself, we feed into her insecurities, leveraging them to murder Birdley, or at least try to murder him. Just like the normal route, we are the player imposing our will onto Chris, the big difference being that this version of the player is a little too curious and possibly fiendish. The influence we have over Chris appears to stretch itself over to Noelle. We force Chris and Noelle by association to make several morally dubious decisions. Stealing, freezing people, growing stronger, all leading up to the point where Noelle equips the Thorn Ring and becomes strong enough to use Snowgrave, a fatal spell. I use air quotes around fatal because, to my absolute shock, Birdley is still alive.
I mean, a couple of things. One, alive. He may be, for all intents and purposes, brain dead. We don't know.
For now. As it turns out, fatal can mean that it causes death or it leads to failure or disaster. What really seems to be the crux of the weird route is not Birdley's death or even the aggressive genocidal nature of the route, but rather the subjugation of Noelle. Noelle is the key to the weird route, and I believe Susie is the lock. Cryptic metaphors aside, the weird route seems to be contingent on Noelle possessing the Thorn Ring, or rather the Thorn Ring being attached to her hand. This is what the player forces Chris to do in Chapter 4, leading to one of the greatest and deserved smackdowns we've ever seen. The question is...
Again, so I've said it before, but because before, originally, from what I understand, the original plan for Deltarune was we would only be left with Chapters 1, and then later on, Toby would have released 2, 3, 4, all in one go for the complete game and stuff like that. And it is very much of my opinion that we weren't, supposed to discover the Snowgrave, or at least know of its existence until Chapter 3, with all of the S-rank mini games kind of hinting at a lot of the stuff involved with the Weird Route in Chapter 2. But that being said, I do love, the culture that kind of evolved around the Weird Route, especially in the very beginning. And again, a person who said it very well was Half-Bred Chaos when I forget which video it was they did, but they talked about how, again, in Undertale, Toby he specifically put messages in the code for people who were decompiling the game to find secrets to not spoil, to not put things online and to not spoil the game for people. Because of that whole sort of old culture that gaming used to have, where you'd have rumors and stuff going around on the playground before the internet was so developed and so all-encompassing as it is now. But when the Weird Route was first discovered, it very much had that same sort of schoolyard rumor feel about it. I have very vague memories of when it was first discovered, but I remember hearing, the very early mentions of people saying, oh, hey, there's a secret route in Chapter 2 that it allows you to have a genocide route and stuff like that. But it took a good couple of weeks before it started picking up speed, or to the point where, YouTubers actually started making Snowgrave and Weird Route playthroughs of Deltarune. Which, in internet time, especially modern internet time, is astronomically slow. Now, again, nowadays, as, more and more things have been learned about the Snowgrave route and how you play it and stuff like that, it's become more normal. It's lost that, mystical schoolyard rumor that it had at the very beginning. but I loved that for a point in time, it did have the feeling of a schoolyard rumor. Just like, if we were, even if it was just for a little bit of time, we were back.
Why? No, seriously, why? Why do we do this? Within the weird route, there appears to be some kind of goal the player has in mind, and yet we don't know what it is. This makes the discovery of such route so, well,
weird. Yeah.
There appears to be an active goal the player is working towards, however it is unclear what the goal is. This route appears to be Deltarune's parallel version of the genocide route, except much worse. In the genocide route in Undertale, you systematically exterminate every monster in the underground. Hypothetically speaking, if we want to kill everything that moves, we can just use Chris's knife. That's convenient. Is what I would say if we could access it. As we know, Chris is not completely powerless against our influence.
Yeah, and the thing is, Chris does not like the player going down the weird route. Again, while they are under our control, Chris is very much an independent actor in all this, even if it's only temporarily.
They can resist what we say, and they can resist commands. We cannot make Chris do whatever we want at any given moment. They can resist, and they probably would resist any attempt to use that knife. We are at an impasse. So let us put ourselves inside the mind of a player that wanted to do a genocide route. As an Undertale fan, they would be pretty bummed that they wouldn't get an alternative ending by being more aggressive. What I'm getting at here is that this weird route is a declaration of rebellion. From the beginning, the game is adamant about how little our choices matter, and while we don't know what the ending is right now, it appears that this hypothetical version of the player does know it, and was not satisfied. Susie appears to unknowingly rub the truth in our face, stating that our choices don't matter. If they did, what would we even want to change? If you'll indulge me, I'm going to try to look at Deltarune from a lens where the game is finished. It is very unlikely that an unaware Deltarune player would stumble across the weird route on their first playthrough. Not impossible, just unlikely. In an ideal world, a player would play through Deltarune as normal, start to finish, whatever happens happens, but the curious player, the one that tries to exhaust all of the content, would be the one to find the weird route later on, perhaps on a second or even third playthrough. This is more than likely something meant to be found after the base game has already been completed. From this perspective, we can make the assumption that this route seeks to change the ending. Change the ending in what way? Without knowing the actual ending, we can only guess, but now that 4 of 7 chapters are out, we can more accurately guess what the weird route is moving towards. Naturally, to find out where something is going, we must take note of where it has been. Behold, the Deltarune canon events timelines. One normal side, one weird side. See how it's all squiggly? That's because it's weird. Across 2 different timelines, I have laid out all of the major contextual differences between the 2 routes so far, and by citing these differences, we can maybe understand what the weird route is working towards. Please keep in mind, this is a 100% committed weird route timeline, as in I will not be counting aborted weird route possibilities. Let's begin. Walking forward versus walking back to the trash pit. In some video games, a common tactic developers use to hide secrets or even bonus items would be to hide them behind the player. It's a video game instinct of mine at this point that whenever I'm dropped into a location, I look behind me to see if there's anything there. In most games of Deltarune structure, the intended pathway is to the right, and you move forward to progress the story. Traveling left to begin the weird route is made to represent a morbid curiosity. I wonder what would happen if I went this way instead. In the normal route, you progress with Noelle as usual, and teach Noelle the basics of fighting. Pacifist players would play as pacifists, aggressive players would just attack with Chris, and occasionally use Noelle's Ice Shock if they had enough TP, but if you travel left, this is where the weird route can begin. You have to carry out a very specific set of actions. If you defeat even a single enemy without using Ice Shock, the route is over. The game is very adamant about making you freeze every enemy you come across, more than likely due to the fact that this attack has profoundly different effects. Reducing a Darkner's HP by a certain amount will typically cause them to run away. Ice Shock freezes them in place. If a Darkner runs away, sure, they'll hate you and refuse to come to Castletown, but they will live to fight another day. These enemies, not so much.
Can't leave.
Are they dead? Well, technically they are inanimate objects, so they weren't really alive to begin with, but yeah. For now, the only thing we can say, for sure, is that being frozen by Noelle's ice shock is worse than just getting beaten up and running away.
And again, it's that whole thing very similar to the genocide route. It's like, this route is different and stuff like that, the whole thing of wanting to experience literally everything. But it's very much the much more work-intensive route. Like, in Genocide, in Undertale, if you're going to Genocide route, I mean, again, like, you have to go through every single room, just constantly walking back and forth to just kill literally every single monster in the room until you start getting encounters where nobody came. And in this one, like, while in the weird route, some things are different. Like in some parts, stuff starts going really weird because you didn't do things right. But it's still the same thing where you have to fight all these enemies, but you have to fight them in a much slower and a more methodical way. Where you can't use Chris, you can only use Noelle, and you can only. It's a route where you're making things more difficult for yourself for very little. At least for what it seems like now, very little benefit, with the exception of, you're doing something new.
These are the first deviations in the weird route. The path set before you is being ignored, while you are using this loophole in the combat system to make enemies perish. You have stumbled across this quirk in the game systems, and as a result, you get the idea to use it to break the game's rules. This tells us that the player's plan involves the subversion of the game's intended rules, or even its very purpose. Completing the puzzle versus proceed. Arriving at this area will introduce you to the first mouse puzzle. Considering this room is labeled Annoying Mouse Room 1, it could be inferred that this hypothetical version of the player believes this as well. Personally, I don't think the mouse puzzles are too difficult. Then again, this is from the perspective of a repeated playthrough. Completing a puzzle once is fine, yet doing the same puzzle over and over again can get, well, annoying. So annoying, the player is fed up with Noelle and her fear of mice, ignoring the puzzle altogether. It is with this our hypnotic power word is revealed, and yes,
Proceed.
That's the phrase I'm going with. The word in question is proceed. Proceed, or to continue as planned. This word is repeated several times to Noelle. As of now, we can assume that this word is being used as a repeated command to lull Noelle into a more obedient state. But what I want to know is, where did this word come from? Why was this word chosen above others? Why do we just say proceed when we can simply say shut up and do what I tell you?
I mean, again, it's one of those things I can very much see because, while it's kind of revealed in Deltarune that whenever we choose something for Chris to say, they choose to say it exactly as we chose it. Like, again, in Chapter 4, when you're asking people around church about stuff, when you ask somebody about a key, it's revealed through context clues that Chris literally just said key, instead of like saying, hey, have you heard of a key to the shelter south of town or something like that. But at the same time, like, very few of, the things Chris can say are one-word sentences. Proceed is like, it's very, for lack of a better word, robotic, efficient. Like, when you're telling something to proceed, it's a very official and authoritative thing to say, as opposed to, hey, come on, or, we're skipping this, or, something like that. Like, this is like, it's very much saying, hey, like, move forward because you don't have a choice in this.
Maybe it was chosen for its simplicity. There is an intended action that we are demanding Noelle make, and we want her to proceed with this action. The word proceed is straight to the point, and it can't really be warped beyond its intended meaning. Usually, if Chris has an issue with what we are saying, they will put their own spin on it, so to stop that from happening, the word is kept simple. Perhaps it is in reference to this new alternative path we have discovered. This path is exciting. The player wants to know what happens next, so they don't want to stop. If you solve the puzzle for Noelle, then it'll be just like before. We know what will happen if you do the puzzle, because we have done the puzzle before. But what if we proceed down this path? We don't know what new interesting adventures we'll find. Again, we feel this sense of morbid curiosity. It's not even about ordering Noelle around or hurting people at this point. It's more about finding out what happens if we push the game too far. What happens if we push Noelle too far? We are friends versus we're something else. Dialogue between Chris and Noelle is typically one-sided in either route. As we know, Chris is not the most talkative person. There are several differences in the dialogue along the way. In a normal route, we can affirm our friendship with Noelle, talk about whether Susie would ride with her on the Ferris wheel and such. The weird route features dialogue that is more demanding, even possessive in nature. The dialogue can demand that Noelle rides with Chris on the Ferris wheel. And while this is a very aggressive and toxic thing to say, I would like to point out that this doesn't happen in either route. On the surface, this statement appears to seek out a more possessive relationship between the Lightners.
Yeah, that's one of those things, like, again, I mean, with Chris, they're obviously non-binary, and we don't know exactly what their orientation is, whether it be, heteronormative for whatever their actual biological sex is, or if they're, like, bi or gay or whatever it is. Noelle is, at the very least, bi in some way, given that, her main, love interest in the game is Susie. But the whole thing, again, I'm forgetting which video it was pointed out, but the whole thing with the weird root is that you're very... Well, there's obviously nothing wrong with, heteronormative, relationships and stuff like that, obviously. The whole thing is that in the weird root, it's being forced on both of them in a very toxic and unhealthy kind of way.
But more interestingly, this statement goes against the narrative of the game, which could be the real reason why the player can say it. Remember, the route is working towards subverting the game in some way, the narrative of the game included. Susie is meant to ride with Noelle on the Ferris wheel. That is how the story goes. If Chris were to ride with Noelle on the Ferris wheel, then the narrative would be successfully changed. This is more than likely what this version of the player would want. More content, a branching path that they laid out for themselves. In this scenario, the player is not entertaining the idea of cooperating with the game's narrative, or Noelle for that matter. The Addison they speak to wonders if they are a couple, which Noelle naturally shoots down, stating that they are closer to being friends. The term something else could have several connotations, the most disturbing of which could be ownership. In the mind of this hypothetical player,
definitely.
Noelle is not a friend. She's a doll, a plaything, something we can dress up and manipulate to do our bidding. The way I see it, the weird route is way worse than Undertale's genocide route.
Well, I mean, I'd hesitate to go that far because, again, genocide route, genocide against an entire population of people, yeah, that's not that good. Though this, at least from everything we've seen in the weird route, it seems to be like just everything focused in on a single individual. Noelle in this case. And, I mean, I guess I do know, the human brain has a very hard time with big numbers as opposed to small numbers. But, yeah, again, while I'd hesitate to say the weird route is worse than the genocide route, it's certainly a lot more icky.
Walking away, the Addison offers a ring. The Addison always asks for an amount of money that is more than what you have. No matter what, they will always ask for $1 dark dollar more. Such a small detail until you realize that once again this is the player being presented with something they cannot have. It's almost as if the world itself is determined to make sure you do not get this ring. The narrative will continue on without this ring, but the provocative nature of breaking the rules is calling you back. You repeat the phrase, "get it," several times, ultimately forcing Noelle to get the ring for you. The game said you couldn't have something, and now you are using that possessive level of control over Noelle
to get it.
The Birdly fight. Birdly gets beaten down in the normal route, which stops him from further harassing Noelle, and the fact that he's still breathing means he can come to your rescue later. In the weird route, Birdly is fatally wounded with the use of Snowgrave. To be honest, I don't think Birdley's defeat was all that pertinent to the player's plan, at least not specifically Birdley.
Also, something I've just noticed here, and I wonder if anybody said it before, because, the whole thing with Noelle is, ice powers, ice mage and stuff like that. Why is her, image here on, next to the health bar fire? Is that just, due to, an offensive attack? Or is there something else going on there? That's weird. I only just noticed that.
The player wanted to use Snowgrave to further break the rules, finally push past the world's limitations by killing someone. Birdley was simply collateral damage. If the player truly wanted Birdley dead, then I don't think they would let Chris help him while he was recuperating in the hospital. No, I don't suspect that the player wants Birdley dead specifically. Don't get me wrong, if Birdley stands in the way of the player's new path, they would kill him in 2 seconds. Birdley was more of a trial run, a test if you will. A trial to see just how powerful Noelle could get. She casts Snowgrave and Birdley is encased in ice. Birdley is in a coma, but he is still alive. We attempted to break the game's rules by killing someone, and we failed. But we came very close. This would deter most people from trying again, but the player is not most people in this example. They are still curious. They want to know what will happen if they try again. Maybe this time, on someone else. The player has an agenda to carry out in Chapter 4. Force Noelle to re-equip the Thorn Ring. While we do this, we can say, Noelle will get stronger. This appears to be the current objective, and I believe I know what's going on. The player wants to try Snowgrave again. This time around, they will make Noelle even stronger than she was when you fought Birdley. But no matter what, she needs the Thorn Ring to do so. The plan is seemingly to make Noelle even stronger than she was before, and use Snowgrave again. Shortcut versus fun adventures.
Yeah.
Something that is very important to note about the deviating timeline is that the Weird Routes timeline is much shorter. You can complete a Weird Route Chapter 2 in a fraction of the time compared to normal. While this difference in length is mainly due to actions that don't take place, I wanted to bring your attention to the fact that Susie and Rouse still find their way to the Queen's mansion. They are still on the narrative's intended path, most likely due to Rouse knowing the narrative. Not only is this new path shorter, it appears to be drawing an emotional gap between Chris and their friends. Not just the fact that we don't get to go on wonderful Dark World adventures with them, but in other cases too. We refuse to watch what Noelle and Susie are doing, despite Rouse saying we should. Susie leaves Chris to seal the fountain by themselves, and of course we leave Susie hanging, arguably the worst sin of all. In this scenario, the player shows a certain level of coldness towards Chris's friends, more than likely convinced that they are just objects, a means to an end in this new story they have charted for themselves. This new path is teased by Rouse to have a less than ideal conclusion. If we even mention some of the Weird Routes deviations to Rouse, he will disagree with them, stating that they are not good ideas. The last major deviation from the Weird Route timeline is the fact that we do not hear Susie outside of the window, and Carol Holiday calls us on the phone. Noelle is supposedly looking forward to seeing us at the festival tomorrow. This would be the first time a deviation has changed the ending of an entire chapter. Not by a whole lot, but the changes are clear. Noelle is seemingly now fully under our control, or at least at a level of control which will make her more drawn to Chris, just as the player wanted. My only question is, why is Noelle so special? Well, for one, she's already pretty close to Chris. The trust between these two is more than likely the reason why these events play out the way they do. There's already a level of trust there. Also, I would not be surprised if Noelle was revealed to have an excessive amount of determination. Not just with the Addison, but also the Spamton Neophyte, Noelle appears to have power over the game in some way. The game does not allow us to buy the freeze ring, so Noelle gets it for us. Spamton Neo increases his defense to a ridiculous amount, but Noelle allows us to win. She is already trusting of Chris, and she is very powerful in her own right. That is the why Now we can focus on the what. The backroom games in Chapter 3 are seemingly tied to the weird route in some way, almost prophetic as they reference the events that happened in Chapter 2 and potentially even beyond. If we are to continue based on the assumptions that these minigames are foretelling of future weird route events, it would seem that Noelle is to be used as an item, a key of sorts. Now that we have taken note of every major deviation from the normal route, I think we can come up with a solid prediction as to how the weird route will end.
And again, like, so much weird stuff, again, fitting for the name, but like, man, like, this could get really disturbing.
In its most basic of forms, the weird route is meant to be a rebellion against the initial narrative of the game. The events of the game are already prophesized down to seemingly scary levels of detail. Rouse has the prophecy memorized, to the point where he is completely shocked when Susie walks back outside before we get a chance to watch them. Also, brief side note, we still never found out what happened in there. Not that big of a deal, just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, because again, Weird Root, like, with everything that happened between Chris and Noelle, like, how would that interaction between, Susie and Noelle have changed?
Important thing to note is that Rouse is surprised, as in, this is not mentioned in the prophecy whatsoever. This all takes place after a massive set of deviations, but the effects of your choice are clear. The narrative is changing. To find out what the player is changing the narrative to, we need to take note of their actions. They are forcing their will onto Noelle, drawing her in and using her previously established friendship with Chris to coerce her into making decisions she wouldn't normally make. These plans potentially scare Chris to the point where they sneak off and remove the ring from her finger. The scene in which we refit the thorn ring back onto Noelle's finger is clear enough evidence that the player wants Noelle to have that ring no matter what. They want Noelle to become stronger, and they more than likely want her to use Snowgrave again. But who's the target? Well, if you saw the thumbnail, you already know where I'm going with this. The player within the weird route wants one thing: control. Control over Noelle, control over the narrative, control over the game. They want to make a new ending for the story, a more favorable one, and the one person who could possibly stand in our way is none other than Susie. Who is the only other character that has displayed power over video game mechanics.
Susie.
Even if she doesn't realize, Susie has unknowingly taken a portion of control away from the player numerous times. She can decide to take Rouse with her. She can decide that she's going to thrash us. She has decided that our choices don't matter. In the normal route, those events are paid no mind, as we don't see Susie as a threat. However, in the weird routes example, she has the power the player wants. In the fight with Gearson, he talks about the Pen of Hope, how the 5th chapter was the last entry in Lord of the Hammer, the story being a direct parallel to the prophecy, and by association the story of Deltarune. What follows is up to her. It is only a matter of time before Susie discovers the soul. Technically she already did when it was used to banish the Titan. I have a strong inclination that depending on what route we are playing, it will change the way Susie perceives this realization. Whether or not she will understand the full context is unclear, but that is of no consequence to the player. If Susie also discovers her ability to control the narrative, then she will be an even greater threat, potentially disabling our control from the world altogether. This player, the very same that would want this route to happen, doesn't like Susie at all. Through their actions, Chris is now more distant from Susie than they typically would be. They are closer to Noelle, someone who Susie genuinely cares for.
And again, I'm talking about like my personal headcanons for the prophecy right now. And the one is, again, for the normal route, is that the villains, the knight and whoever they're working with, is that they're trying to like bend the prophecy out of shape without breaking it so that they can kind of have their goals be helped or fulfilled by the prophecy as well. The other theory I have is that, Susie isn't even a part of the prophecy. She's not the girl in the prophecy because, again, the picture doesn't really match her. She doesn't use a sword, doesn't wear dresses, all that sort of stuff. But Noelle is. And thus, again, since she's not a part of the prophecy, she's able to break things without even realizing it because she's not, being restricted by it. So, if that second theory is actually true, then that might be, part of the whole deal.
Whether the relationship between Susie and Noelle is romantic isn't truly important, as Susie cares about Noelle regardless. If she were to ever learn of the player's influence, something she absolutely could do in the coming chapters, if she were to learn what we were doing to Noelle, then this would put our control over Chris at risk. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Well, good, because that was a complete accident. Anyway, we now have a level of control over Noelle, and we have turned Noelle into a potential weapon to be used against those who defy us. If we were to order Noelle to cast Snowgrave on Susie, would she be able to survive? As Noelle is right now? Probably. But what if we make Noelle stronger? Susie is soon becoming a symbol of hope in this story, and I don't believe it'll matter what role we are playing. Some of you may be wondering how the knight factors into this plan, and, well, the solution is the same. It doesn't matter if you think the knight is December or Carol. Both of these characters would care about Noelle. If we had Noelle as a bargaining chip, they wouldn't be able to touch us. It's the perfect plan. Noelle is the key. Both sides of the conflict care about Noelle and wouldn't dare fight us if we have Noelle under our control. So there you have it. That's my theory. The weird route is a deviation, a branching path made by the player because they don't like the ending set before them. Out of fear that Susie would use her own influence to put a stop to their plans, they draw Chris closer to Noelle, placing a level of influence on her. Making Noelle stronger, they will have the perfect tool to use against Susie and Carol Holiday. A powerful weapon that they just can't bring themselves to destroy. Will the power of love win the day? Will this new future the player seeks to create be achieved? What do you think will happen during the Weird Route's conclusion? I would love to hear what you think. Until next time, thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye. Now I can get back to writing the Susie video. Susie is very strong. Susie is very cool. Susie,
honestly, this is what it's like whenever I try to write something out.
Yeah.
Oh, God, again. It's the whole thing. Susie is definitely important. And, God, the idea that, she's so powerful or so, the actual protagonist of the game that the Weird Route is entirely dedicated to just defeating her. That's, honestly, that's really funny, but also be really messed up. God. God, again, but just the idea, again, I like these theories. I'm holding out to see what actually happens in the game, but again, jeez, at this point, literally anything could happen. But yeah, that is going to be it for now. So yeah, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.